Well, I'm hoping to work on a project like this for Canada, and that's what I'm working on right now, so hopefully it's going to come pretty soon. Because I have a huge problem. Most of the time we're always focusing on what's going on in the United States, and we never take a look at what's going on over here at home. And we forget about people like Bonnie Jean-Pierre, Freddy Villanueva, Kilem Regis, Magloire, Farshad Mohammadi, Mohamed Hanas Binis, and all these deaths have been happening over here in Canada, and people are like, okay, this is not going on over here. We always feel like here we're the good neighbors, and we're the ones that are doing actually an excellent job when it comes to policing our racialized communities. But when you take a look at the stats going on in Canada, and you have to make the difference because there's more black people living in the United States than there is a population there. There's the total population of Canada. And when you see the videos of what's going on in the United States, we feel like, okay, this is worse over there. But it's just that the only difference that we have is that the different incidents or altercation that happen with the police over here are not shown on videos. And if that was the case, I think there will be people rising up. And even if we don't have the videos, you can see what was happening in Montreal North with Freddy Villanueva, with Bonnie Jean-Pierre. People rise up. People said, well, we don't want this. We don't want to deal with this. And this is something that we need to avoid. And most of the time, people don't even know what is the first reason why there's a huge police presence in the cities all across Canada. The number one reason in the whole country, in a study that was conducted by McGill University in 2015, the primary reason is not the level of crime in that community. It has nothing to do with it. It's the number of racialized people in that community and the number of First Nation people living in this community. And that's all you know. There's not all you know, but that's why you have a bigger police presence. And when you have a bigger police presence, what is it going to create? It's going to create more repression against these different communities. And that's why a black person over in Canada and in Quebec particularly, because the stats came out, I believe, in 2011, you're 7 times more likely to be arrested for possession of weed than a white person. And that's a rate that is way higher. That's what's going on in the United States. Although Trudeau wants to legalize marijuana, we're still getting arrested for marijuana. And you are more likely to be controlled by a police officer over in Montreal than you are statistically in the United States. It's just to give an example, there was a research that came out in, I believe, in 2010, following the death of Freddy Villanueva. And it mentioned the population of Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, which is really a white neighborhood. There's only 1% of that population that is black. But 15% of the control made by the police is after black people. So it doesn't mean if you're a little or if you have less black person, you're not more subject to be controlled by the police or victim of the police. And what happens when you have more police officers in your communities? Well, the next thing is that you are more likely to be arrested. Montreal North, in the whole Canada, is the poorest circonscription, how you call it, circonscription, riding, there you go. It's the poorest riding in the whole country. And you have a lot of police officers. So what happened is that if you stand up on, if you are sitting on top of your seat like that, as a young person, you are subject to be arrested and getting a ticket for that, because this is illegal if you do that. If you are spitting on the floor, you're also subject to be arrested for that. If you're riding your bike on the sidewalk, you will get a ticket for that as well. Why you get a ticket? Because police wants to identify you. Exactly like what happened with Danny Villanueva. I don't know if you're all familiar with the case of Freddy Villanueva, who was shot and killed in 2008 by a police officer, Agent Jean-Loup Lapointe, badge number 3776. And he was shot in Montreal North. And the first reason why he shot Freddy Villanueva, I'm not going to go into these details, but I will go afterwards. But he saw a couple of people, and that's what he said, he saw them playing dice, although afterwards in the coroner's inquest, he testified that he never saw any dice. But that was his reason to go and try to control Danny Villanueva, to get his information, because he said, I've never seen that guy. I want to get his information. So he was trying to book people in his book to do some racial profiling. And 54 seconds afterwards, Freddy Villanueva was shot in the chest and killed. Denis Meas was shot in the shoulder and Jeffrey Sagor Metellus was shot in the back running away from what was going on at that time. So you got 3 people that got shot, and you got that police officer, the only one that said in the whole coroner's inquest that somebody was punching me. You had a police officer that was standing right where you were, on the ground on the leg of Dani Villanueva, and she said that she never feared for her life. She never saw anybody touching that police officer. And that police officer was promoted to what? To the SWAT team. So this is going on over here in Canada. I'm not even going after the case of Bonnie Jean-Pierre, which is as terrible as the case of Freddy Villanueva. But the only problem is that he has a criminal record. And then when you have a criminal record, well, you know, people are not... they don't really care about people that have been to jail and stuff like that. But all this to say is that, you know, we have conditions that are pretty terrible over in Montreal. And even in Ottawa, there was an autistic man that was beaten to death by Ottawa police officer Abdurrahim Habdi. And he was beaten to death and nobody cares about it. And I see a lot, and that's why I'm very disappointed sometimes in our communities and in Canada in general, is that I don't see the impact of mobilizing for what's going on in Montreal, in Canada, but when we are affected by what's going on in the United States, we show strong support, and we are more like, okay, we need to do something about it. But when we look at our case, well, it's sometimes far worse. And it's not just only with the police. If you graduate from university as a black person with a second-degree diploma, you will make $28,000 less than a white person. And these statistics are going on over here in Canada. And it's even worse if you take a look at the different level of position for hierarchy, for, we call them a power position in the public spaces in Montreal. The population of Montreal, 30% of them are from racialized communities. But if you take a look at the people holding these different positions for power jobs, how you call them, power jobs, or places like professionals, well, it's more than professional. It's people like chief of police, chief of this stuff, people sitting on boards, people like that. So people that have a power position, well, they're composed of only 5% of the racialized communities. So you see that racialized communities are completely excluded from these position of powers. And it's the same thing if you take a look at Hydro-Québec, which has 20,000 employees. Only 312 of them are from racialized communities. So it's far under the stats of the racialized communities over here in Quebec. So there's a lot of things that you can do about it, and that's why we've decided to go with a commission on systemic racism that is going on in Quebec. And I could go on and on and on all day, but I think it's time to ask the different question that we have from the crowd. And one thing that was staggering from the statistic at the end, it's the 1,500 people that have been killed by the police, and none of them were accused. Do you think it's different over here? It's not different at all, because I think there was around 276 people that have been killed by the police since 1987, and there was only 4 people that were accused, and it's all for the same guy. It's for Barnabé. So Barnabé was beaten to death and kept alive for a long time, although he was already dead. But these 4 police officers were accused of that, and they received a punishment for it, and they were recognized as being guilty for it. But other than that, you didn't have any of it. And same thing in Ontario. I think it was 512 since 1990, and none of them, although they had the investigation bureau, you had no accuser. It's the SIU Special Investigation Unit that investigate on police officers killing other police officers, while you had no accusation in Ontario. So that's why I find it's very interesting to see what's going on, not only in the state, but United Kingdom. But if we take a look at what's going on here at home, we always feel like we're the good neighbors, everything is better over here. Well, when you take a look at the stats, we need to work, and we have lots of job to do to make sure that we come to be a real just society, because this is not just the case right now. I think in Ontario you have the Toronto Star, who has a journalist, Desmond Cole. Desmond Cole works really hard in bringing forward or shedding lights on what's going on with the different incidents with the police force in Toronto. Over here we don't have anybody. We don't have any media newspaper that will report on these cases. And if you take a look at this movie, what came out after the killing of Mark Duggan, what came out is the police said, well, somebody shot. So everybody just went quiet. What happened with Freddie Villanueva when it happens over here in Quebec? The police officer said that they were attacked by 20 youth at that time. So it keeps everybody calm, and it makes, it's a way of appeasing the crowd to make sure that they don't riot, they don't go crazy and stuff like that. And most of the time when you see somebody getting killed by a police officer, what's the first thing that you're going to see in the media? That person had a knife. Everybody has a knife, it seems like. But when you take a look, an in-depth look in this situation, well, sometimes you don't even have a knife, but in the newspaper it's mentioned. But when you take an in-depth look at what really happened at that time, it wasn't part of it. So the media has a role to play, and they don't take the time to do a correct investigation on what happened at that case. And especially, I don't want to blame the Francophone media, but I think we should be, if you take a look at the case with Patrick Lagacé, I don't know if you're all familiar with what happened with Patrick Lagacé recently. He was actually, his phone was tapped by the police officers. But these things have been happening in the black communities for a long time, and lots of people have been complaining about it. And now because it's a news journalist, well, it's all over the place, all over the medias, but it should have been all over the place way back when. And maybe if it was all over the place way back when with people getting tapped by the police, well, when it was illegal, maybe it would never reach to these newspapers, to these journalists at this time, because they would have been fighting for the citizen, but now they're just fighting for their privilege. So there's many issues like that that you need to take connect the dot to take a look at it. So the media is definitely part of it, and the absence of people from racialized community is definitely a problem. You can not even find, I can ask the crowd, how many people from the racialized communities do you know from the mass media? There's probably under 5 people in the whole province of Quebec. And that's a huge issue, because when they got, just take for example, when there was the incident of black faces, it was white people talking about black faces, saying if it's okay to have black faces, and they were discussing that, and there was nobody else in that conversation. So for them it was fine, because there was nobody present to talk about it. So it's a huge issue. And it doesn't mean sometimes you have people that have a black face, but they have white mask also, and that could be a problem as well. So yeah, it's not always a solution. Maybe the best solution most of the time is to own your own media. So, or, yeah. Mais on peut faire un tour, je ne sais pas ici dans la salle, qui a été victime de profilage racial, juste par les mains levées dans les airs, qui a été victime de profilage racial, on va juste voir. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Qui a été plus que 2 fois contrôlé par la police? Ici dans... Qui a été contrôlé une seule fois par la police? On a, OK. Plus que 2 fois par la police, contrôlé par 2 fois. 3 fois par la police, contrôlé, contrôle de routine par la police. Qui est contrôlé 4 fois par la police? Qui est côté... Shit, toi, il y a une danger. 5 fois par la police. Contrôle 10 fois par la police. Moi, je peux lever ma main jusqu'à 30. J'ai grandi à Montréal-Nord, OK? Et j'ai commencé à conduire à l'âge de 16 ans, OK? Et jusqu'à ce jour, dernièrement, je me promenais dans la rue, j'ai dit, je vais faire de la bicyclette. Can I say that in French, or is that okay? You gotta translate it, right? No? Okay, so I'm all right. Is it okay? I'll say it in English then. It was 11 at night, and I felt like I needed to do some exercise, and I decided to take my bike and go for a ride. I seen a police officer. I wanted to go to the dépanneur, and I like the way I say dépanneur. Okay. Anyways, so I said, okay, I'll go over there, and I see the police officer. He was just watching me riding my own bike. Okay, just a bicycle, And I said, okay, this guy is looking for me. So I just went to buy some chocolate milk, drink my chocolate milk, and just go back towards my place. And I knew he was following me from behind, because he was waiting for me to do a mistake. So I stopped at the stop, for which I don't do when I ride my bike, and I don't think a lot of people do. But this time I said, I'll make sure I do that. So then I just stopped, put my feet on the ground to make sure, because I'm an ex-police officer, so I know I have to put my feet on the ground, go back on my bike, just keep on riding. And the police officer, and that's just a couple of months ago, and the police officer just pulled me over, and he said, well, I need to have your identification, because I've seen that you just burn your stop, you didn't stop for, you contravene to the municipal laws, and I need your information. And I'm like, I know I did my stop, and I was in the contravening, and I did everything right, because I knew you were going to follow me, and I was waiting just for that moment. He said, do you want me to play back, to turn on the video so I can play it back for you? And he's just pushing me and pushing me all the time to To provoke, exactly. And I know my rights, and I can use them. And the only thing he wanted to know is that he wanted to know my name. But I'm not 18 years old. I'm not even 16 years old or anything like that. You know, I've been doing that for a long time. And he can see that I knew my rights, but still he was there to provoke me. And that's what he used to do with lots of people. And if I did not keep my cool, what could have happened at the end of it? So it's just provocation after provocation. And what's wrong with riding your bike at night, not causing any trouble? Why is he going after me for no reason? You know? So that's when you feel excluded. You don't feel like you belong to the society. And when I take a look at people passing by, they think, well, this guy is a criminal because the police is talking to him. And now, why should I be a criminal? At the end of the day, you know, some youths are thinking about that, you know? So they're just making sure that they're provoking you. And this happens all the time. If it happens to me, it happens to other people, and it's not normal that it should happen to anybody else. And it doesn't show on my face that I'm a criminal, of course. What is a face with what is a criminal face? I don't know what it is, but if you ask anybody, you know, most of the time they say, well, they're facing racial profiling, that should be enough for me. I trust you, I believe you. If you tell me as a woman you've been raped, I believe you, on vous croit. All right? And why we have to go into a discussion all the time, and we have tons of stats that proves that racial profiling exists. And we have stats from the SPVM themselves that prove that they had racial profiling. And that's why they don't want to be transparent nowadays to show that, you know, they don't want to show these stats to show that they're doing racial profiling. Because any police force, like Hamilton did it, like different police force in Toronto did it as well, as soon as you take a look at their digits, their data, you see that they're conducting or they're having racial profiling, different communities, people of Arab descent, people from black communities, and it's just a fact. What do we do about it? Fuck all. That's a problem. So. One thing that I would love us to do is to question the role and mandate of police force. We have never addressed that question, never addressed that issue. And we take it for granted that police officers is something that belongs to our society. We never take a look to see, well, what will be a society without police force? There's many places in the world that don't have a police force. And if you take a look at the time that, since the time that we have police force is very recent, why do we take it for granted that police officers should be there? And is it normal that a police officer is harmed to protect you? In Newfoundland, during the 1980s, they did not have any firearms, and that's in Canada, you know. And police officers in London, you know, the one that shot, that's an elite group, that's a special group that have firearms. But 75% of the bobbies, people without a firearm, they want to keep it that way. They don't want any firearms. For me, it totally makes sense because most of the time in different incidents, especially in Canada, people are not even harmed. The only person that is harmed is a police officer, and who ends up being killed is the citizen. So we need to talk about this. We need to have a commission on systemic racism. That's also another problem because these issues, there's so many stats about it that are loud and clear, and we need to, that proves that there is, that we are living in a racist society. But what do we do to prevent that? We don't do anything as well, you know. And I was mentioning the statistic about people sitting on position of power, but it's far worse for women, you know. For women, 17% of the position of power is held by women, but under 1% for black women. These positions are being held. So when you're a woman, you're facing more conditions, which we call intersectionality. So you're facing that even more. Even for black Muslim women, then they will face more, even more danger. So it gets far worse and far worse and far worse for everybody. So we need to question our society because sometimes we feel like we've reached the perfect society. Canada is what we have as a perfect society, but we never question it. And same thing with the jail system. 75% of the people in the jail system at the federal level are being held for soft crimes. What is a soft crime? People for possession of drugs, people for minor incident like theft, fraud, and different stuff like property damages and stuff like that. And that's what we have, and people breaking their probation. You have places in the world where people like that are not living in prison. They're living outside of prison. But right now we're building jails and prison for these kind of people. And you know how much it's costing us per year to have one prisoner, one male prisoner? It's $100,000. For a female, it's $160,000 per year. Just imagine what we could do with that amount of money. So we need to rethink our society and change what we're facing right now, and to fight against colonialism. And did I say that right? I think you could say it better. Oh, you're like, I'm not going to even say it. But there's so many things that we need to fight against. I don't know where to start. Yeah. And I think the role of the grassroots movement is fundamental in helping these family grieving, because you have to understand there's no support from the government, no support psychologically, no legal support, no financial support to pay for the funerals. There's absolutely nothing going on. And when I take in consideration that most of the time these people getting killed by the police, it's in a poor community, so when you have to pay for the funeral, you have no support, and there's already no support for the psychological aspect of it. So a lot has to be done to help the family. And if you take a look at the comment from the daughter, which is very touching, you know, she said that she wants to go back and sleep with her father up and above. Well, when I take a look at some people surviving the violence of a death of a close one, I just can't imagine how they can go through the whole day. How can a mother go through? How can a brother go through? How can a friend go through? And especially when they witness the death of that person, like it was the case for Freddy Villanueva. So these people make the people that works at the grassroots level stronger, because these people facing this condition, and the humility and the strength that they have is something that I will never understand. And I just can't understand how they can go through. And that's why there was lots of network created with the different mothers that lost a close one in the hands of the police. And I think it helped a lot of these mothers, you know, grieving and facing these different impact of having a son or a daughter being assassinated by the police. For that question, I think regarding the different, why the black people, or why, if I believe in the social media, can help these different situations within the black communities and other racialized communities. I said there's a reason why we are on these medias, and the reason why is because we're completely absent from the main media, so that the mass media. So that's why we're more present in the social medias. And I hate to compare ourselves with what's going on in the United States, because with Montreal Republic and the different action that we've taken with Freddy Villanueva, we've managed to have an investigation bureau here in Quebec after 8 years asking for it, which is not perfect, but we are still having it. We had other step as an inquiry regarding the death of Freddy Villanueva. We still ask for a commission on systemic racism. So we've accomplished a lot of things that even in the United States are not close to being accomplished, and we still have a long way to go, of course, but I think that we're just an incident away from putting all these different solutions that we're putting forward to have a Charlie Hebdo, like what happened in France, a shooting from somebody, and then we're gonna associate it with it, like they've done in France, and we're gonna flip totally and forget about all these different projects that we're putting forward, which will make a just society, and we will do totally the opposite if there's an incident like that. It's gonna be a society that's gonna be a society under law, like a police state, and which is very close to what we are having right now. Especially with the health issues, is something that we don't talk often about. You have to understand that right now, black women are being arrested, incarcerated more than any other woman in Canada. And not only that, I take stats that is very important, is the way that police approach black women. They say there's a cultural difference. And I take, for example, the case of Maria Alta Garcia, who was killed by her husband in 2012 or 2013, and she has been complaining to police officer that this guy was threatening for her life. And what did the police say? Well, they said it's a cultural issue. so it's okay. A week afterwards, she was killed by that boyfriend. You know, so this is one of the situations that is not being comptabilisé or being taken in equation of the different factors that a black woman will be getting, but it's something that is, because you cannot calculate that, you know, it's very hard, and we don't have an institute that calculates these different incidents, but it's still something that the black women are facing in our society. And if you take a look at the woman being arrested or a woman in prison, being held in prison, in federal prison, 25% of them have been consulted or have consulted for mental health issues before they were taken to jails. So we also have to deal with these mental issues, and I'm not saying that it's a racialized thing, mental issues, but it's something that you definitely have to look at. And right now in Quebec, we have the highest proportion of prisoners being held at maximum security, which is being held in prison for 23 hours out of 24 hours in a jail cell. And that's where we have the highest proportion that we had in the whole country right now. And most of that, they attribute that to people belonging to street gang members. So this is another issue, because if you held 23 hours out of 24 hours and you already have mental issue, what is it gonna do? It's just gonna accentuate these mental health issue. And when you're gonna come out of prison, it's gonna be far worse than when you got in prison. Yeah, especially with mental health issue, because actually I just did a conference not too long ago, and one person said that, yeah, I had trouble dealing with the police, but because I'm a black woman, for me, I wanted to experiment that, not experiment that, but externalize, thank you for the word, and I needed to see a psychologist. And that psychologist, what did that person say? She said, well, no, there's not a problem such as race in Quebec. There's not issues like that. So if you go and try to reach for a person that is actually addressing these issues as a black person or racialized person, you're gonna face another wall because there's a lack of understanding of what people from racialized communities are facing. Just take a look at what's going on in that movie. You know, there's often a dual identity. What is a double identity? Is that these people, when you take a look at them, when they're together, they're not acting the same way. But once they go to look for a job, they go for work, they're acting completely differently. You know? So this is a double identity that people from racialized communities have all internalized. And sometimes because you are internalizing that, well, you're in two different worlds, so you're never really in your right world. So you're always in somebody else's body, you're never in your body. And it's hard to understand unless you experience that. So that's why you hear a lot of people from different racialized communities that say, fuck that, sorry to say that, I'm just gonna be myself, and if I'm gonna lose some friends towards that, that's okay, because I'm just gonna be myself, because even in society, it's hard to be myself, to be honest with everybody else. And not only that, you know, if you take a look at the media, the Occidental media, and if you take a look at the medias from other countries around the world, they have a different way of describing any situation. Just watch a soccer game. It's not the same thing. There's more passion, there's more emotion towards it. And once we're living in an Occidental society, we are learning that we cannot really be ourselves. We cannot be too emotional. Otherwise, we're gonna be called an angry black woman. What is being an angry black woman? You know, it's just being yourself. There's no such thing as being an angry black woman. But we get stereotypes just for being ourselves. So you don't want to be getting stereotypes, so you're just going to be somebody else. So you're never really yourself. So that's why we're living in double identity. And that's a huge, I don't want to say it's a mental health issue, but it's definitely a terrible issue that we are facing and that people are not addressing often enough.